Letter 30 of Letters from Hell. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Letters from Hell by Valdemar Adolph Thisted. Translated by LWJS. Letter 30. Light has all but vanished. My thoughts keep wandering back to Lily, my one chance of attaining at least a semblance of peace. How sweetly she bore up against illness while she was able. What patience, what fortitude was hers to quiet our apprehensions. But she grew restless at last. We thought of returning to Europe as speedily as possible. She, however, entreated to be taken back to Bethlehem, and we could not refuse her. With all possible care we had set about the journey, yet were fearful of consequences on reaching our destination, though Lily assured us she felt better and only needed rest. Hours she passed reclining on a little terrace by the convent wall, where I had spread a canvas to protect her from the sun, I sitting near her. Indeed, I hardly left her now, and may well say that I was sorrowful unto death. It was there that, for the last time, she told me a story, making an effort as though to prove her fitness. Her last story! It was not the effort that overcame her. Her happy smile, the sweet cadence of her voice said so, but death itself. The morning broke. The mists of night that veiled the clefts between Olivet and Jerusalem yielded to the return of life. The Apostle James was coming down the mount, he who was called the Just, the brother of the Lord. He had spent the night communing with God on the mountain, even as the Master had been wont, and he loved the spot where his Lord had wrestled in agony. The apostle was going home, but quitting the olive grove, he tarried a little on the hillside overlooking the valley. The sun was about to rise, a fresh wind scattering the curling mists. Close by lay the garden of Gethsemane. Brook Cedron murmured below. The royal city opposite lifted her brow, the proud temple sparkling in glory, the temple of which one stone soon would not be left upon another. But James hoped to be spared the awful sight, for he loved his town and people. A solemn foreboding told him he would have run his race before and won the crown. A happy foreboding, for more than town and people he loved his Lord, and to be with him forever would be the fullness of joy. He was about to proceed when a woman came up to him, young and fair, but plunged in grief. She was but 17. Hot tears ran down her cheek, and she wrung her hands. Falling at the apostle's feet, she implored him to pity her. Her husband, she said, had been struck down by a wasting fever and was fast dying. Physicians could not help him, and they were very poor. He must die, alas, and they loved one another so truly. The apostle looked at her in silence, as though reading her inmost soul. He knew her, for she had been present repeatedly when he had proclaimed the good tidings of grace. But faith had not yet taken root in her heart. She clung to the world, and the love of self was strong. It seemed hard to give up the world in the flower of youth, and harder still to yield self. The old man continued gazing at the young woman silently. She felt the power of his look and was troubled, for with all tenderness there was in his eye a solemn seriousness, a holy influence over souls which is born of God. At last he spoke. "Woman, do you love him truly?" "Yes, Father, with all my heart," replied she tremblingly. "As much as yourself?" continued the apostle. "Oh, far more," cried she, sobs breaking her voice. "It is well, my daughter. There is a means by which you may save your husband's life. You may think it hard, but remember it is the only means. Go about from house to house begging charity for him." "Alas, Father, how should alms save him from dying?" "It is not alms of money you shall ask for, but alms of time. All the days or parts of days which good people, for the sake of charity, will yield out of their own lives shall be given to your husband." The sorrowful wife thought within herself that at all events some people were inclined to charity, and that most valued money far more than time, that while cleaving to mammon they wasted many a precious day quite recklessly. She thanked the apostle, and gathering courage went her way. And presently she was seen going about Jerusalem, telling her story from door to door with humble entreaty, speaking of her sick husband whom she loved, and of the servant of God who had directed her to the pity of charitable men. "Oh, have mercy on me," she cried. "Let me not ask in vain. Give me a day, oh, each of you, and God will bless you forever." But it was quite hopeless. Some laughed at her, requesting to know if she were in her right mind. Others pushed her away rudely for even suggesting such a thing. Others again thought it a good joke, but preferred not to join in it. Some few, however, seemed ready to admit the possible efficacy of the remedy, but were none the less unwilling to assist in procuring the means. Their own lives were precarious, they said. They had much ado in order to provide for their families, and should not feel justified in sparing any of their precious time. But strange to say, the very people who were known to waste time most carelessly seemed the least willing to part with even an hour. The poor young wife grew faint at heart, and the cruel taunts she met with from some. So far, Lily, and no further. One of those paroxysms broke the thread of her story, and before long that of her life. She did not recover. The power of life was gone, or rather it was as a lamp making a few last flickering efforts, suddenly going out in darkness. Years passed. 15 winters had gone over my head. I was no longer young. I remembered at times Lily's broken story, and in some hour of tender emotion I was one day even prevailed on to tell it to a friend, who thought it so admirable that he fain would have known the whole. 15 years, and how little had I tried to spend them in a manner worthy of the lovely memory of her who was gone. But strange to tell, after that lapse of time, a stray number of some periodical fell into my hands. I was startled beyond measure on noticing a little story entitled "The Begging Wife, a Legend of Jerusalem." Could it be Lily's story? It was, indeed, not quite in the manner of her telling, but unmistakably the same, and no other ending would have seemed probable. This, then, is the continuation. The young woman came to the door of a rich money changer. Having learned her trouble, he considered a while, looking at the matter in the light of a possible speculation. The dying man might have money, and no doubt was prepared to pay handsomely for what, after all, was not worth a great sum. How much would he give for a day, a month, a year? Alas, the sorrowing wife must abandon her hopes. Her husband was poor, very poor. Continuing her way, she met a Roman centurion. There was little prospect that he, a heathen, would have a heart for her, the Jewess. But he looked good-natured, and she might try. Indeed, the centurion understood her better than she expected, for if he had not faith, he had superstition enough to make him credulous. "My dear child," he said doubtfully, stroking his grizzly beard, "I would fain help thee. But you see, this life of mine is so uncertain that I know not for truth whether I have any right to call it mine. I may be dead tomorrow, and by Jove, it would be wicked to grant away what I have not got. Indeed, I am not sure whether it would not be robbing Caesar of his due, for my life is sold to him. But I am very sorry for you, nevertheless. Shall I give you some money?" "But money was not what she wanted," she said so sadly, and the centurion went his way. She next accosted a well-to-do tradesman, the owner of a carpenter's shop, employing hundreds of hands. That man was one of the 10 lepers whom the Lord had cleansed, and of whom one only turned back to glorify God. But he was not that one. The woman happened to address him with the selfsame words with which they had called upon the Son of God. "Master, have mercy on us." But he knew no mercy. Turning to the busy scene in his shop, he answered, "Woman, look at all this work. I cannot nearly meet demands, and yet you expect me to give you of the little time there is? Nay, you must ask elsewhere." But she importuned him. "O master, for Rabbi Ben Miriam's sake, who pitied you, pity me and my husband." The man had not expected to be thus reminded. He grew red, then pale, but found an answer presently. "Well, as you seem to know that story, your request is doubly unfair. Don't you see how much shorter my life is than that of other people, since I can only be said to have lived from the day I was healed of that leprosy? It is really too much to expect me to shorten a life already shortened. Get thee gone, woman. Time is too precious for further talk." Having left the workshop, the poor wife presently found herself near the temple. Now, filled with grief though she was, she forgot not to cast her mite into the treasury, and going up she met a priest who, having executed his office, was retiring from the house of God. "Thou God of Abraham," he cried, drawing his garments about him as she meekly endeavored to kiss the hem, "Thou God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, listen to this woman. Am I to be the victim of her mad request? It is sorcery." "I am neither mad nor given to sorcery," she urged humbly. "Surely this is sorcery," reiterated the priest, looking at her disdainfully. "Beware, lest you be brought into the synagogue to be stoned." She next went to the house of a high-born Syrian of princely parentage who had come to Jerusalem to enjoy his life, and he had enjoyed it, emptying the cup of pleasure to the very dregs. With his appetites blunted, he knew no longer how to waste his time. She was admitted through an inner court, a paradise in itself, where statues of whitest marble gleamed between dark-leaved shrubberies, where fountains played and birds united in chorus, where sweet flowerets steeped the air with fragrance, through pillared halls hung with Tyrian purple and enriched with golden ivory, over floors of Roman mosaic, and through doors opened and shut by slaves in gorgeous attire, she reached at last to where the lord of all this grandeur was taking his luxurious repose after the exertion of the bath. She found him reclining on a couch with half-closed eyes. An Abyssinian slave, dark as night, was cooling the air about his head with a fan of peacock feathers, while a Greek girl, fair as the day, stroked the soles of his feet with gentle touch. Both these women were beautiful, each after her kind, but that was not what the poor supplicant thought of. Still less did she consider that she herself, holding the mean between Abyssinian and Greek, united in her own person the beauty of both night and day, with her warm complexion and her lustrous eyes, that the charms of these women paled before hers like stars outshone by the moon. "Woman," said the young man with languid voice, "it is true I care little for life. It is a miserable farce at best. But why should I present you with that which hangs heavy on my own hands? I see no reason. Philanthropy? Pooh! It is give and take in the world. Now, what could you give me of pleasure or amusement that I have not tasted to the full? I loathe life. Go and leave me to myself." Crying bitterly, the poor wife left the house of the Syrian. But hers was a sacred mission. She dared not give up, not yet. There was a certain ruler who lived for his pleasure, and whose liberality invited others to share it. To live with him meant to enjoy, and apart from enjoyment, the world to his understanding was a blank. He had known higher aims. As a youth he had observed all the commandments, and had been anxious to inherit life. He was that same young man who came to the Lord saying, "All these things have I kept. What lack I yet?" But he, whom he had called good master, told him, "If thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give it to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me." And that was not what the young man had expected, for he had great possessions. It was a turning point in his life, and from that moment he ceased believing in an inheritance beyond the grave. He joined the Sadducees, who said that there was no resurrection, and became one of their most zealous followers. The poor young woman, therefore, could not well have asked of one more unlikely to give. The rich man replied contemptuously, "How foolish and surpassingly arrogant! I have but this one life, and do you expect me to be lavish of it to any chance comer? Know that a day of my existence could not be paid for with all the gold of Ophir. You have mistaken me, my pretty child. You had better apply to the Pharisees." For 2 full days she continued begging from house to house, well nigh exhausting the streets of Jerusalem, but all she obtained was unkindly speeches, if not worse. At the close of the 2nd day she yielded to despair, falling on the ground by the gate of Damascus, tired to death and undone with grief. There she lay with a dull sense of misery. But suddenly the well of her tears was dried, a smile like a gleam of sunshine lighting up her grief-worn face. Fatigue was nothing now. She rose quickly and went to where she knew she would find the apostle. "Well, my daughter, and how have you sped?" asked he with loving sympathy. "Alas, father, men are void of pity. The world is evil, and its sinful desires are for self only." "You say truly. Compassion is with God alone." "Yes, Father, and to him therefore will I go. No one will give me as much as a single day, and many days are needed to restore my husband to my love. I well nigh despaired, but suddenly I remembered that I had a life, and to judge from my great youth, a long life before me. O man of God, tell me, may I not give of mine own abundance what hard-hearted men are not willing to make up between them? My husband is half my life to me. Let me give him then the half of my life. Let us live together and die together. Or if it must be, let him have the whole. I am willing to die so that he may live." Thus she entreated, the tears flowing down gently over her love-lit face. But the apostle touched her head with a hand of blessing, and said, deeply moved, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Thou hast found grace in the sight of God. Depart in peace. Thy husband is given thee, and ye shall live together." This is the story, Lily's last. Ask me not to describe to you the impression it made on me. I felt as though Lily indeed were speaking to me from another world. My tears fell on the page, and I bowed my head, sorrowing not so much for Lily as for myself. One thing I felt certain of even then. Had the choice been given me, I would gladly have divided my life with her. I, selfish as I was, I believe I could have given up the whole to save hers, for I did love her. But now what use was the story to me, save that it moved my tears, a few tears which I was ashamed to show. I endeavor to conclude this letter by the fast-failing light. I tremble at the coming darkness. This fear, I suspect, is chiefly born from a feeling that a night to come, we know not how soon, will usher in the day of judgment. Ah, fearful night, that will bring us to the day when the Son of Man shall come in the clouds of heaven. Lost! It is a terrible word, enclosing all the horrors of hell. Am I lost? Lost forever? Not yet. The forever is to come, says a voice within. But again, is there hope? Is there a possibility of being saved? I cannot say. Both yes and no seem beyond me. Sometimes I do try and cling to a faint shadow of hope, but it darts through my soul as a flash of lightning. I am utterly unable to hold it fast. At times, again, when I have gone through seasons of deepest suffering, a sudden calm sinks down upon me. Dare I think it healing peace? But no sooner am I aware of it than it is gone, and I even doubt that it was. Of course, there can be no such thing as conversion in hell, but I keep asking, might it not be possible that all these terrible sufferings, both of retrospect and of present reality, had power to prepare the soul, that perchance at the moment when it is called out to appear at the great judgment, it will flee to the Savior and clasp his feet for mercy and peace? And if it were so, what if it were thousands of years hence, or tens of thousands? How infinitely precious were this hope! Let me suffer, however long, if so great a salvation were possible in the end. Lily, I know that she loves me, with a heavenly tenderness akin to the Saviour's for his own. And if the power of love, that wondrous mystery, be more than a mere fable, there is at any rate this one bond left between me and life. For I know, my Lily, that bond will never break in all eternity, but a bond which will neither break nor bring about union surely cannot exist in the sight of heaven. And again, could Lily be happy, enjoy salvation without me? That is another question. Can she be content to live when I am lost? And will God deny her what she loved most on earth, what even now in heaven she loves most next to him? I cannot believe it. So this leaves me with a hope centered in Lily, not because she has power to save me, but because she had been appointed to lead me to the feet of the Savior. Perhaps it will be given her to do so in a future age. She may yet show me the cross, even as I, all unworthy, showed it to her when she died. Did she not say with her last breath that we should meet again? And with this sure hope she fell asleep in peace. Is it possible that God would have let her leave me with a peace founded on an untruth, a miserable delusion, even at the solemn moment of entering his presence? Surely it is impossible. So the conclusion seems to lie very near, but I dare not draw it. Again also, the whole of hell is burthened with a feeling, veiled and but dimly understood, that there is a possibility of redemption before the final word is spoken, when all is at an end. Hope raises her front, however feebly, yea, a great hope, and surely God, being what He is, could never let millions of miserable souls feed on that streak of light if it were mere delusion. Surely, surely not. He is the God of justice, and we receive the due reward of our deeds. But again, He is the God of mercy and unspeakable tenderness, who can never delight in our misery. And He is the God of truth. He cannot let us feed on a lie. And yet, is it not possible also that delusion is part of the punishment, being, like everything else, the outcome of a sin-deluded life? Ah, woe is me! Where is that hope which but a moment since illumined my soul as with a reflection of eternity? It is gone, gone like a false dawn swallowed up in night. I give up. My heart would break, but nothing ever breaks here. Hearts here are strong to bear any amount of misery. No, we are not so fortunate as to break our hearts. I was thinking of something else. There may be a hope left. Nothing certainly could be much worse. Things are desperately fast here and not made for rupture. All is cause and effect, past act and consequence. Indeed, since the word hell seems to have become objectionable with well-bred people, let me suggest their calling this place the world of consequences. Have you any idea that I am writing in an agony of despair? You would shrink back from me in horror could you see me, though perchance you still call me friend. May heaven preserve you from ever seeing me. But I forget I was trying to finish this letter. It may be long, very long, before you hear of me again, if ever. I still will call you friend, yet it will be natural that if all break, friendship too must vanish. Farewell then, my friend. Please God we shall never meet. I wrote the above as the awful night was spreading her wings. Oh, how I dreaded its settling. Every renewed darkness brings new agony, new despair, and as soon as the light has vanished entirely, hell is swept of everything with which imagination had endowed it. Towns, castles, houses, parks, churches, clubs, and all places of amusement, everything has vanished, leaving a desert void, and souls unclothed of aught but bare being. Hell is then like a vast dungeon where man and woman, rich and poor, crawl about in utter loneliness. While the light lasted, dusky though at best it is, one could arrange oneself according to one's fancy, having everything one listed, unreal though it were, mere shadows of thought. Still, it is a kind of occupation to surround oneself with imagined possessions. But this terrible night admits of no such jugglery. It leaves me naked, poor, forsaken, homeless, friendless, a prey to bitter reality. I shrink together within my miserable self, not knowing where I am or who may be near me, nor do I care to know, filled with the one thought that I am in the place of lost souls, lost myself. Evil thoughts keep settling round my heart, beleaguering it as the ruthless Romans did the unhappy city of David. This siege, too, ends with a terrible destruction, an agony of suffering, the like of which the world has never seen. As before, I pass the long night shuddering, trembling for outward cold, but with a horrible fire within. You say in the world, and say truly, that there are conflicts in which even strong men fail. Alas, the hardest conflict now seems a happy condition, for here struggling is at an end, as being too good for hell. There is only raving and madness here, a kind of spiritual suicide even, but no struggling for victory. The soul here is a victim, forsaken by the powers of good. Every little devil is permitted to fasten his miserable claws on the helpless mind. Understand me, it is a figure of speech. There are no devils in this place save our own evil desires, passions, and sinful thoughts. Satan at times is here, but thanks be to God, not yet has he final power over the soul. In this very night he was present, come to look on the miserable beings he delights in considering his. Though not always, yet generally, he chooses darkness for his visits. As a sudden whirlwind, felt but not seen, he is among us, and hell is frozen with horror. All the millions of souls then shrink together in an agony of unutterable fear, knowing that one is among them who never knew pity and ruth, the great destroyer, ready to destroy them. And this is the dreadful thing, that though certain of his presence, I feeling it, not one of us can say, "See here, see there." You hear a crackling as of fire. Serpents of flame keep darting across the tenebrous space, showing his path. But where is he, the dread enemy? His consuming eye at this very moment may be upon you, gloating over your trembling soul. I will be silent. I cannot dwell on these horrors. Be it enough to say that again and again I felt myself in the very grasp of the evil one who seemed to dally with my anguish. It took all manner of forms. Suffice it to give one. I suddenly felt as though I were a bottomless ocean in which my sins were swimming about like fish, and the devil sat on the shore, grinning and throwing his lines, using now this evil desire, now that as a bait. He was an expert, catching fish upon fish. Suddenly the float disappeared, dragged down into the deep. A good catch, no doubt. He brought it up triumphantly. O Lord of pity, my own heart, bleeding and writhing. It was horrible, horrible. Let me drop the veil. This, too, is imagination, of course, or, at worst, Satan's own evil pastime with the hopeless mind. But nevertheless, what is there more real than death? And I suffered 100 deaths in that night. At last, I know not after what length of time, hell was given up again to its own state of misery, rising to it with a gasp as out of a fearful dream. Then I felt it a relief almost to be but a prey once more to my own evil thoughts. Bad as it was, to be left to myself seemed gain. As before, the whole of my past life was unrolled to my sight, sin upon sin, failure upon failure, gnawing at my heart till it was but a single festering wound. But with all the suffering, a longing was blended more deep, more burning, than any I had felt before. Not for the life behind me, the world with its pleasures was dead, but for a living soul I thirsted, a soul to understand me. Lily, my father, Aunt Betty, from them I was separated to eternity, a great gulf being fixed between them and me. But my mother, my own mother, there was only death between me and her, and a wondrous truth lies hidden in that word. Love is stronger than death. That was the closest bond, after all, that between my mother and me, the bond of nature. What in all the universe could be better than a mother's love? With a thirsty longing my thoughts turned to her. O mother, where art thou? And here again a great pain side by side with yearning. How badly I had rewarded her love in life. Had I not been her one and all? But she, in truth, was very little to me. How wrongly I had judged her, often thinking meanly of her motives, deeming her cold and worldly, a selfish nature to which the appreciation of society was more than the heart's goodness, to which Christianity even was a mere matter of propriety, in which faith and charity were not strong enough to teach her that self and the world should be sacrificed, but which hesitated not to sacrifice even the holiest on the world's altars to the advantage of self. How wickedly I had thought of her, ungrateful wretch that I was. I grieved for it now. Surely she had been the best of mothers, the most perfect of women, loving and good. These painful thoughts unnerved me. I felt weak and softened. "Oh, mother, dear mother," my heart kept crying with the wail of a child. "I care not if you laugh at me, but I had come to this. I longed for her with the simple longing of the hungry babe for the mother's breast. For the first time the desire was strong in me to return to the upper world, an indescribable power drawing me irresistibly. The ghost nature was fluttering within me, lifting its wings, urging me to go. But my yearning found vent in the cry only, "Mother, mother!" A faint streak of dawn. My eye fell on a cowering figure, ill-shaped and moaning, sunk in a heap not far from me, An impossible, frightful thought stole through me at the sight. My soul heaved like a storm-lashed sea. The figure moved and turned. God in heaven, that terrible face, ghastly and distorted, it was my mother's. I dashed away in headlong flight. I would not believe it. But alas, my friend, what matters my believing it or not? It was my mother. Poor, poor mother. This is the crushing blow, if such there be here. I thought I had known the worst, but this is awful, awful. What more shall I say? Words are powerless. The despair of hell you cannot conceive. It were poor consolation that being equally miserable now we might weep together, uphold one another, comforting each other in pain. But even that is denied. Tears we have not, sympathy there is not. At least I have not found it. And naturally, since love is utterly unknown here, we can only cower side by side through ages to come, each taken up with self. Fellowship? Nay, but it is worse than desert loneliness. We have not a word to say to one another. We dread to look at each other. Everything between us is cold, dead, dead. We have our own agony of fire, each within the soul. But that fire which goes forth to warm another is as a burnt-out crater filled with the ashes of despair. I can no more. Fare thee well. The End. End of Letter 30, read by Martha Weller, Champaign, Illinois, April 29th, 2023. End of Letters from Hell by Valdemar Adolph Thisted, translated by L.W.J.S.